Libby, it's another serious episode. You know, we don't usually joke so much on the cold opens when we're talking particularly about massive, international issues.
It's war. It's serious, and people are dying.
And I guess I'm just like, what I'm frustrated about that is, on the local level, we do have some goofy, daffy behavior from local electeds this week. Bob Ferguson dropped that he might kick the millionaire's tax to next year in an email to donors. Yesterday, Katie Wilson walked out of a press conference, gave us 2.5 details on her massive tiny house expansion, and didn't take any questions. I want to clown on these things, but we're at war again. We got to talk about war.
At war again, and we'll get back to local politics very soon, Scott, I promise. But let's just be a little bit serious today. How about that?
That's right. Let's do it. It's time for Sound Politics. This is Sound Politics. I'm Scott Greenstone.
And I'm Libby Denkmann. And Scott, the U.S. and Israel's war with Iran is now almost a week old.
Yeah. And while we watch it unfold, there are so many angles that are obviously relevant to us here in the Pacific Northwest. We have a major military presence here. Navy Growler warplanes from Whidbey Island are flying in Iran, and we have a congressional delegation that has been mostly vocally opposed to the war, all the Democrats at least.
Yeah.
Mike Baumgartner, the Republican who we've had on this show a couple times, even talking about Iran, he is pretty happy about it.
Yeah, he made a speech on the House floor, the congressman, basically saying that the Islamic Republic has been killing Americans by funding terrorists and through its proxies for almost 50 years. And he called this an ongoing and bloody campaign, kind of echoing what Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had said about, we didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it.
Yes. And just to be clear, that is one of several what I would call shifting rationales from the administration so far this week. We heard leading up to this that Iran poses a nuclear threat, but supposedly we destroyed that nuclear threat last year. And actually, no, the imminent threat was the ballistic missiles and drones. Or then we also heard it's about letting the Iranian people have a chance to overthrow their government. But also, it's not a regime change war. Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, he really threw in just a head scratcher the other day. He said the U.S. had to preemptively strike Iran because Israel was going to strike Iran, and then Iran would strike the U.S. in retaliation.
Yes. So it was like a preemption of the preemptive strike by Israel. And Rubio has since tried to walk that back a bit. This one also sticks with me. Here's Carolyn Levitt yesterday briefing the press.
The president had a feeling, again, based on fact, that Iran was going to strike the United States, was going to strike our assets in the region, and he made a determination to launch Operation Epic Fury based on all of those reasons.
So she said it was a feeling that Iran was going to strike based on fact.
A feeling, yeah, right. I mean, I think some, while this military action is fairly popular with Republicans, based on some polling I've seen, I think with independents, certainly with a lot of the folks that were won over to the MAGA side, the Trump side last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, the reason he won.
Right. This unclearness, I've seen, clips from sort of MAGA podcasters are they even trying to sell the war this time? And it may be part of the reason why the polling generally from American voters overall, how they feel is not great.
Yeah, 6 in 10 disapprove of the war right now, according to NBC. There is a group of people here in the Seattle area, though, who have been cheering these military operations by the U.S. and Israel. You might have seen there was this really joyous celebration in Bellevue on Saturday after the confirmation that Ayatollah Khamenei was killed. And that is part of the Iranian diaspora, people who have an intimate connection and knowledge of the country. Yeah. They feel strongly that what we are seeing right now is justice for a criminal dictatorship. And I think it's really hard for some Americans, many of us, to make sense of that. This idea that for some Iranians, the sight of bombs dropping on their home country or, their parents' home country, that this is what they've been waiting for 47 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going to try to unpack that a bit today, but we're going to rely on Iranians here locally and Iranian-Americans to share their perspectives. As much as possible, you and I, Libby, will try to get out of the way and let them speak.
For once, get us out of the way. Yeah.
In a bit here, we'll be joined by a big Trump booster in Washington state, Hossein Khorram, who has called the attacks by the U.S. a dream coming true. He's going to be bringing, that slice of the picture. But first, we're going to hear from some other voices briefly. All that today on Sound Politics when we come back.
And we're back with Sound Politics. Scott, we've both been calling and meeting with Iranians this week in the Seattle area. They've been sharing a whole range of reactions to the start of war. And that includes one of the people who organized the celebration in Bellevue over the weekend, Homaira Bakhtiari of Bothell. She described to me the moment that she heard that the supreme leader was dead.
I was crying. I was happy at the same time. I don't know. I couldn't believe it that it didn't really happen. Finally, it happened. I have to tell you that that day was one of the best day of my entire life.
And I can't emphasize this enough, Scott, that everybody who spoke to us is sharing their own perspectives. The Iranian community is diverse. We can't possibly capture every shade of feelings in this one conversation.
But I do think that hatred of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, it's almost universal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, despite their disagreements, that was absolutely consistent. For Iranians I talked to, Khamenei, he's murderous. He's terrible. Homaira Bakhtiari said she is happy not just about Khamenei's death, but about the attacks by Israel and the U.S. She believes that the Iranian people are more at risk from their own government right now, from the Islamic Republic, than from U.S. and Israel military strikes, whom, she really describes as conducting a rescue mission.
This is not the first time that another country comes to rescue the people who are suffering inside and living under the dictatorship of their own government. Like in World War II, there was a coalition against Hitler in Germany.
Homaira points to the Islamic Republic's deadly crackdown against unarmed protesters in January, which had a death toll estimated in the tens of thousands. And this is so important to remember. Iranians are reeling from this massacre. Many, many people across the country were killed by IRGC and besieged militia. These were agents of the state. More people imprisoned. That was just a little under 2 months ago.
Yeah, killed so essentially by their own government.
Yeah, and it's like if you took, Renee Good or Alex Preddy, but multiply that by 10 or 30,000 or more in cities everywhere over 2 days. Imagine how, that would feel.
Yeah. Well, and so, Libby, you actually went to a vigil at Seattle City Hall on Sunday for those protesters who were killed. What kinds of conversations did you have there? I mean, on Sunday, that was a day after the Supreme Leader was killed.
Yeah, so this was a vigil held by the Seattle Isfahan Sister City Advocacy Group, and it just happened that the U.S. had just started bombing Iran, and again, the Ayatollah had just been announced that, the day before he had been killed. I think Mitra Freer, who is an oncology nurse, she really captured the sentiment of several people I met at this vigil. She expressed joy at the confirmation that Khamenei was gone, but that joy was also tempered by worry.
He was an evil man, and the blood of many innocent people's blood is on his hand. But also I'm very worried who's going to replace him. I am concerned for the extent of this war, how many more innocent lives going to be lost.
Mitra was in Iran during the 80s with the Iran-Iraq war, and bombs were dropping on a daily basis. And she said all those memories had been flooding back watching the start of war again. Parmita Ziai, who is an independent artist here in Seattle, she called the death of Khamenei a moment of relief. She also said, though, she's overwhelmed by a lot of emotions.
I'm feeling hope, I'm feeling fear, I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling frustrated that, my people are always in the middle of decisions that are not in our control a lot of times.
Wow. Yeah. I interviewed State Representative Daria Farivar this week. She's the first Iranian-American woman to be elected to the state legislature in Washington. She tried to capture for me this range of feelings in the Iranian community. Here's what she said.
There are some folks who are excited and hopeful and celebrating. And there are many folks that are heartbroken and very worried for what is to come. But I fall more in that camp. History tells us that whatever is about to happen or will continue is not going to be good. And it will be at the detriment to Iranians and service members, and also the Iranian-American, Afghan-American, Muslim community in the United States as well.
I mean, yeah, just contrast that with Homeira's joy and hope. It's such a differing response.
Yeah, and Farivar, just to be clear, I think she called Khamenei evil personified, but said she did not feel relief, at his death simply because of all of the death she foresees coming. She also, wanted to point out that with the travel ban and ICE crackdowns, right, Customs and Border Protection, deportations, the Trump administration, she says, is being hypocritical when they say they're helping Iranians.
And just a few weeks ago, deporting Iranians back to Iran before they strike the country, killing hundreds of people, if not thousands. I think we need to also talk about those impacts.
And so we spoke on Monday. Obviously, Farivar is a critic of President Trump. She's a Democrat.
Yeah.
She kind of brings us back to this American left-right political lens on this war.
I also got on the phone with UW professor Ari Afani, and he agrees we should be approaching this with an eye to the power and the politics involved. He brought up those comments by Marco Rubio that we mentioned earlier, basically saying that Israel made this call to go to war and pulled the U.S. along with it. Israeli media and former officials have mused that a civil war or partition of Iran, that would be an acceptable outcome here.
They're not at all subtle about this. They want Iran not to be able to have any sort of geopolitical influence. They want to rule that region. They want to extend their buffer zone. Why are American lives and taxpayer money going to a war that has been on Netanyahu's wish list ever since he got Saddam Hussein taken out by the U.S.? Why is that happening?
So Ari Afani says that, talk of human rights while bombs are dropping is just perverted, in his word. And our memories about U.S. ambitions in this region are too short.
The language with which we speak about the Middle East is so imperialist. It's so arrogant. I mean, people 10 years after Saddam Hussein was captured would still say, but isn't it a good thing that, he's dead? Well, 1 million people were killed during that war.
That, by the way, is one estimate of how many people were killed. Most estimates put it at more like 100, 200, maybe 300,000 people. Although we're talking about how many people were killed in the Iraq War. The Iraq still feels the impacts of that. But I mean, how is that for contrast from where we started, right? These are kind of the huge differences you hear from Iranian-Americans here in the Seattle area.
Yeah, just on this pod so far, we've gone from Homeira, who says the Islamic Republic is an existential threat to its own people and Iranians need U.S. intervention to survive, to people who say, they're happy but also sad and they're feeling all these same worries all at once, all mixed together. Also to, the Islamic Republic is bad, but Iranians' human rights or hopes for democracy or self-determination, other folks who say that's far from the minds of the U.S. and Israeli officials right now.
Yeah. So Libby, we started out by promising today on the show that we were going to answer the question, why some Iranian-Americans support the U.S. and Israel bombing their homeland or the country they or their parents came here from.
Yeah, it's kind of like the thesis of this whole episode, right?
Exactly, yeah. And so to explore that, we have invited one of the most prominent Iranian-Americans in Washington politics, and honestly, in the Republican fundraising world, I think, to the studio, Hossein Karam. Karam has helped raise millions of dollars for President Trump. He defended Trump against allegations of anti-immigrant sentiment in his first term. And after a brief defection to Ron DeSantis's Republican primary campaign, he was back at Mar-a-Lago on election night in 2024 and a VIP attendee at the inauguration last year. He's also a Seattle area apartment developer and finance co-chair of the Washington State Republican Party, and he fled Iran in 1979 during the revolution. Hossein Karam, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Scott and Libby. I'm honored to be here with you today.
You told me when you first saw news of the attack on Iran, it was like a dream coming true. Tell me why.
You know, it's been 47 years of tyranny, 47 years of killing and murder, and I've been dreaming for a free Iran, this tyrannical regime to fall, the jihadi ideology to fail, but it just never did. And in the process, I've seen tens or hundreds of thousands of Iranians dead. Many Americans have, especially service members, have given the ultimate sacrifice. So it was when it happened, when I saw Khamenei dead, it was just like a dream coming true, but I just never imagined the moment would come. So when it did come, it was surreal. It was almost unbelievable. Thanks to President Trump to making it possible.
So President Trump argued last summer that Iran's nuclear program had been obliterated. And there are indications that we knew that wasn't true almost right away. But, you know, he did drop bunker-busting bombs on several deep sites. He ordered that attack. It's, you know, experts with the International Atomic Energy Agency and even U.S. Senator Ted Cruz recently said there's just no indication Iran was close to getting nuclear weapons. I guess my question is, if the strikes last summer worked like Trump said they did, why attack now and put U.S. soldiers at risk? At the very least, why not just keep the bombing to, I guess, nuclear facilities instead of, you know, civilian areas?
You know, Scott, I think we got to be honest with ourselves when we want to answer that question here. Why would a country which has the second and the first biggest natural resources, gas and oil, in the world, go to the expense that they have taken to develop a nuclear program? This whole thing is a ploy to build a nuclear bomb. The regime has failed their own people significantly, and they think they can find refuge or extend their survival with a nuclear bomb. And that's one way of looking at it. What I think is the jihadist view. The same people, Osama bin Laden, why did he kill 3,000 Americans? He was well off. He had everything in his life. He had a great family, a lot of wealth. Because of jihadi ideology, they wanted to spread their way of Islam to the rest of the world. And the way of Islam their way is to basically occupy and turn their subjects into slaves and the world become a concentration camp. That's what the jihadi ideology is. And that's what the Iranian people the Iranian mullahs were on trajectory to do. Thanks God to President Trump to stop them.
But I think it's a little dangerous to compare Osama bin Laden and like the Islamic Republic simply because one is a state and they are certainly the largest state sponsor of terror. But Osama bin Laden was a singular actor with a network that was a non-state actor. And, you know, they were pretty much okay with, you know, completely martyring themselves for this cause. The Islamic Republic has certainly influenced the area, but they haven't funded anything on the scale of like a 9/11 in the United States, which would certainly be like an existential thing for them to do, right? Like, I don't know if the evidence is there that they are that suicidal, frankly.
Well, I understand your point, but I think you got to take a look at this. Why would they want to make a nuclear weapon? That was their 9/11 moment. They were planning for this. Yes, there are differences. They speak different languages. They're from different part of the world, but the ideology is the same. So is ISIS. They are dead set to basically expand their version of jihadism. And there are differences in between them, but the ideology is the same. And Iranian regime getting a hold of nuclear weapons, it was an absolutely red line that we should never allow them to pass. I've got kids. I will have grandkids soon in this country. I don't want them to live in fear from a Islamic jihadist bomb. So I'm all for President Trump, and I know this is a huge expense, and I know Iranian people have gone through extreme amount of pain. It turns my heart apart to see the place I was born to be torn up like this. Innocent Iranians, bystander civilians, to be butchered with bombs, although it's intentional. It's not intentional. It's incidental. But in a war, in a fog of war, all kinds of things happen. Yeah. But for the good of the world, this is a right thing to do. President Trump did the right thing.
You just talked about the damage. We've been talking about Iran's threat to the world, but you just brought up, and a lot of folks have brought up, the threat to Iranian civilians getting caught up in this fog of war. A number of schools have been hit and destroyed, including a girls' school in Manav. The source of that strike is under investigation, according to U.S. officials. They say the U.S. wouldn't hit a school.
Intentionally
hit a school. Do you think the U.S. and Israel can actually avoid widespread civilian casualties?
I mean, looking at the record, they've done a very good job so far. But there will be, and there has been some incidental damages in a war. But the big thing is the people of Iran are willing to take that cost. That's what I've been hearing from the Iranian people through the social media and the videos they send. They don't like being shot at. They don't like being bombed. They don't like the fear. But this is the cost of freedom. They're willing to pay it. The question is before us: are we willing to pay the cost of freedom for our future generation to stop an evil ideology of jihadism now, or we're willing to just kick the can down the road? All the presidents the United States had since 1979, none of them wanted to face this evil. Everybody kicked the can down the road. But I think one of the things about President Trump is he's thinking out of the box. He's willing to take the risk, and everybody knows he's ready to fight, whether it's his election or whether it's just his enemies or whatnot. So by grace of God, he got elected to be the president of the United States. And I think he's the right person to do this. And God save us, God help us if we don't succeed. We're going to have to live with the evil regime far worse than the Nazis, except this regime will have nuclear weapons and it will make the life hell for the rest of the world, including my and your children and grandchildren.
Since you brought up President Trump, he did say on election night in 2024 when you were at Mar-a-Lago, "I'm not going to start wars. I'm going to stop wars." He bragged in his first term about being the first president for some time who didn't start a war in his presidency. I think a lot of his political rise 10 years ago could be attributed to his open criticism of the Iraq War. Is this a broken promise? What do you say to Republicans who say, what the heck?
President Trump came in. Actually, I happened to be with President Trump that night at the election night. I was his VIP guest, and it was a very surreal, sobering moment. We just didn't know how the election's going to turn out. Everybody was looking. So was Trump, and he wasn't overjoyed. He was very sober, very calm. It felt like something heavenly was coming down. I want to be honest with you. That's how it felt like to everyone. We were so quiet. We just couldn't believe what was unfolding before our eyes. And yes, President Trump promised that. But this is not that promise. We have been in war with Iran for the last 47 years. We lost over 800 Americans in Iraq alone. I mean, this is a huge number. Were we true to those men and women in uniform who took the pledge to serve our nation? And when they made the ultimate sacrifice, did we really find out who caused? And were we able to take vengeance from the people who killed Americans? We did not. I think President Trump is a great patriot. He is doing what we should have done decades ago, except our presidents, past presidents, were cowards, and Trump is not. This is not a war. This is finishing a war. This is the last war or the last counterstrike or last defense that we have to be able to stop a jihadi ideology who's set to destroy the world and turn the world into a concentration camp. Iran is included. See, what they did to the Iranian people is what they want to do to their neighbors, and they're doing that right now, as you can see, by attacking them. And they want to expand that into Europe. They have set the stage to be able to occupy Europe with their crooked ideology, and then the United States.
That brings up this issue of unintended consequences, or what happens when we start a war and then the things spin out of control, potentially. We just heard from Arya Fani with UW. He was talking about concerns that the war is going to ultimately destabilize Iran, potentially lead to partition or a civil war. Axios reported that Israel has made promises about autonomous Kurdish areas or an autonomous Kurdish region that could be carved out of Iran if the country collapses. There's reporting from CNN and the New York Times about the Kurdish forces, Iranian Kurdish forces in Iraq, with the goal of having an insurgency in Iran, that the CIA, armed those Iranian Kurdish forces. And we're talking about small arms. This isn't going to be the thing that unseats the Islamic Republic, but it could contribute to instability. If Iran ends up balkanized or fragmented, is that an acceptable outcome here? Are you concerned about that outcome?
Libby, yes, I am concerned. Yes, and I'm worried like everybody else is. But the alternative of doing nothing, it would be a disaster for the world. We do not want to face a jihadist ideology with a nuclear weapon in their arsenal and the finger on the trigger. So everything that we do, we have to worry about whether we're going to get hit or not. Yes. But I think the risk is worth taking. And yes, you're right. I think there's a chance of some kind of a not regional, but a war between some of the ethnicities. But we need to be clever. The majority of the Iranian people in the country, they lived together with different ethnicities for 3,000 years. So it's a little different from what we have in Iraq.
Or Syria.
You can't really compare it like that. I think I would compare Iran with maybe with Japan. We dropped a nuclear bomb on Japan in World War II. But yet the kingdom stayed, the people endured, and they built a great nation. And they're one of the superpowers in the industry right now because the civility and endurance and the patience of the Japanese people. Iranians are not violent people. They're friendly, they're loving, they're caring. They have a totally different culture and ideology from their neighbors. And I think it's worth it taking that risk. We've got to be careful to support the mainstream Iranian voices. And the mainstream Iranian voices are the youth, the people who died last month in a tune of President Trump said 32,000, some say 60,000, some say 100,000. These people want freedoms that we have here. They don't want to carry arms. They don't want war with their neighbors. They want to live their life free of any religion. This is what they want. And I think they're determined to make sure that dream comes true for them, just like our forefathers did when they wrote the Constitution in the United States.
Hossein, just because we have limited time and I know we have some more things to get to, I'm going to put a pin in the Japan comparison because that did involve just a huge investment by the United States to rebuild after World War II. I mean, it's kind of the blueprint for nation building, which has failed in our last, foray into the Middle East. And so that, I'll just put a pin in that. We can talk about nation building maybe another day. I want to talk about something that's very close to your heart, and that is the Prince Reza Pahlavi, who is the son of the late Shah of Iran. You are part of a very vocal contingent of the Iranian diaspora who support Reza Pahlavi. Assuming the Islamic Republic is toppled, you would like to see him as the opposition leader who takes over Iran. Why do you think he is qualified, and why a monarchy for you is the right future for Iran?
For one of the main reason is the Iranian regime. They have basically destroyed any opposition within Iran. So there has not been any. And if we get something overnight grown, nobody's going to believe in it here because they think it's the same crooked ideology who just changed his face, put a new mask on. That's what people think it's going to happen unless we're vigilant. The Prince Reza Pahlavi, which is my choice.
This is the son of the Shah of Iran who was overthrown in 1979 when you left.
That's correct. He lost a brother. He lost a sister. His father was deposed in a very ugly way. His grandfather was basically rounded up by the British and sent to an island to die in exile. His family paid a very heavy price. And the fact that he's still around politics, it really amazes me for a family who paid such a heavy price. I believe he's doing this not because of fame, because he's doing this to serve the future of Iran. He's extremely popular among the youth, people age of 15 to 35.
How can we tell that, though? Because there's just no polling, right, of the Iranian people because of the horrible repression of the regime. Like, how do you know that he has that kind of sway and influence on that age group?
He's been called out in the rallies in the last couple of weeks repeatedly. Now, remember, if you get caught with, calling Prince Reza Pahlavi, he's the main enemy of the state, that could be a death sentence. But yet they say it. So it's amazing that they're so brave. And I think if you look at the Iranian-American community here, just about everyone who's supporting Reza Pahlavi, and he's not seeking to become the king. He is leading a transitional government to allow people to cast their vote. This is his mandate. This is his promise. What people choose is what he will do. I think he's a man destined for this. He's cut up for this job, and he's the only hope. I hope that our administrations in the United States see that reality, that Iranians have gone through such a chaos and such a savagery that they have lost trust in anyone except one person, and that's the prince.
Does it make you concerned that Trump has been very non-committal in his public comments about Reza Pahlavi? He said he seems like a nice guy, but he's also said it probably is better if somebody internally takes over. It doesn't sound like Trump is taking the Shah's son, the Reza Pahlavi, very seriously right now. Does that bother you?
You gotta go back with just 2 weeks ago. Trump was talking about, well, maybe negotiations succeed, but the whole time was planning an attack on Iran. So President Trump is very clever. He used a deception technique to be able to off-balance their opponents and outsmart anyone in the arena. I believe in Trump. And
you don't think he's going to, Pahlavi turn into like a Machado in Venezuela, where he kind of sidelined the opposition there?
The circumstances are real different. I don't think we're going to have the same scenario. I think it's really hard to tell how it's going to work out. But what I'm telling you, the people of Iran, the youth of Iran, will not choose. They're not going to relent. They're going to fight until get what they need. And what they need is Prince Reza Pahlavi. That's what they want.
I have so many, I guess, questions. I think the unintended consequences are the biggest things that I'm left with. One is, this possibility that a more hardline cleric ends up getting chosen, like Khamenei's son, who just lost his mother and his wife and his kid in the bombings of the compound that killed his dad. Like, seems like he would take the country in a much harder and more extreme direction, hard right direction. There have also just been a lot of bad consequences for Iran over the years of U.S. intervention. You had the 53 coup that unseated a democratically elected prime minister. Of course, Jimmy Carter, reporting has confirmed what was long thought, that President Carter at the time in 1979 helped Khomeini come to power. These are just two instances of the U.S. meddling with Iran. How do you know that this time Hossein would be different?
I think the people of Iran have changed. And if we end up feeding them something that they don't like, they're not going to accept it. Absolutely not going to accept it. People, mothers, wear their slain sons or daughters' shirts and shoes to go on the street. They say, you can kill my kid, but I'm going to carry their way. There's no way you're going to be able to convince those people to live with Mojtaba Khamenei or another cleric. Basically, the religion is totally out of the picture. Anybody with the religious ties would not ever be accepted, maybe a few generations down the road right now. They're looking for someone secular, somebody who has no ties with the Islamist regime, and there's just not that many choices, really aren't. There was an issue about Kurds being armed. They may be just a tool of bringing the regime down. There are a minority group, 10% or less. They're just different ethnic group than the majority of the Persians. And the Iranian people will not accept anyone. The youth will not accept anyone that doesn't sound right and is not worth the sacrifices. And if we go that route, there would be another uprising within months, and instead of 40, 50, 60,000, 100,000 people would die. And then there would be another one. So I think it's to our best interest to listen to the voice of the Iranian youth and try to present them or facilitate what they want, not what they like or what is convenient for us to put in place.
Before we let you go, this is so personal for you. I'm just curious, if you were able to return to a free Iran, what is the first thing that you would do? What do you miss the most?
I like to go to my old home and see what that's like, how much it's changed. I like to see my old friends, the people I haven't met for 50 years, 47 years. And just to be able to go back to where you're from for a little bit. But this is home for me. United States is home right now. I don't think I can really take off. My kids are here. They're going to have grandchildren. So I'm an American, but I like to be able to go and touch those people that I haven't seen for years and years. And I hope I can tell them that I did all I could for you to be able to live a freer life like I did.
I just want to thank you for sharing your feelings as well as your thoughts, and thank you, so much for coming in today. Hossein Karam, you are Washington State Republican Party's finance co-chair. You're a Seattle area apartment developer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Scott and Libby. You guys are the best.
Thanks for listening today. There were so many very closely held feelings about this war among the people we talked to today. And obviously, Hossein is one of a whole spectrum of, how people are feeling. He feels really strongly that his support for this war, his support for, Reza Pahlavi, that this is going to lead to better things for his people. Many people would say that that's a pipe dream, that's not reality.
And I think it's so important because he has so much influence to show what he believes and how he feels in this moment.
Yeah. And also how central the goals for the future of Iran have been in his political journey. You know, we talked a little bit ahead of time about that, about how he got into Republican politics because he, started as somebody who was a Shah supporter, like standing on the corner and near our offices here in Seattle and talking about how much he hoped for the Shah to eventually rise to power.
The return of the Shah. I think, too, I just want to point out, too, that one of the sources of all the conflicted emotions is sort of that the Iranian-American experience is so different. I mean, talk about he supports the Shah or the Shah's son. You know, Daria Farivar, the Democrat that we spoke to, her family fled Iran before him.
Under the Shah. They fled
the Shah.
Yeah.
She said she wouldn't go into details too much, but family members were persecuted by the Shah's secret police, is what she said. So how you feel about this moment, I think, is also fed by your experience or your family's experience going back even more than 50 years.
Yeah, 100%. This issue is layered. We only got to a certain layer of it. It goes way deeper. But I really thank everybody who stuck with us today and all the guests who shared.
That's it for Sound Politics. I'm Scott Greenstone. Our editor is Kat Smith. Our producer is Hans Anderson.
I'm Libby Denkmann. This show is only possible because of your support. Please consider a donation at kuow.org/politics. Thank you very much for being here with us.
And we'll see you next week.